It's one of those places where you can really discover someone with a bit of an adventurous mindset and someone who would like to figure out things themselves. This is the absolute paradise for this. There's not so many places and countries left in the world where it's not all presented to you on a golden plate. But if you actually make the effort of coming here, it's so rewarding and it's really authentic.
Bon dia, welcome to Exploring Timor-Leste, the podcast that talks about Southeast Asia's best kept travel secret. I'm your host Jonty, and I'll share first-hand insights, expert interviews and practical travel tips. Whether you're a traveller, a culture lover or just curious about places rarely covered in the mainstream, you're in the right place. Let's explore Timor-Leste. Today, it's my pleasure to be joined by Birgit Hermann, who is a long-time resident of Dili in Timor-Leste. First of all, what brought you to Timor-Leste?
Hi, Jonty. It's starting to sound a bit scary, but actually I arrived almost 10 years ago. So in December this year will be my 10-year anniversary of touching ground. And initially I came here as a one-year volunteer with the New Zealand VSA program.
And what are you doing now?
I have been working in the wider development sector over the last 10 years and always in a community-based support role. I've been very involved in marine conservation, climate adaptation work, making sure that small-scale fishing continues to be possible for generations to come, like making it really sustainable and helping on all levels. So I had the feeling after so many years of working here in a role where I was in the managerial role, that it's actually more time to ensure that I'm passing on all this leadership knowledge to others to come. So the last 2 years, I've been more focusing on leadership development, coaching, mentoring. Sometimes if there is a need, stepping in short-term for organizations, helping them go through a transition, a crisis, a change management. But yes, I'm a bit involved in a lot of little projects and have a huge passion for the ocean and support some youth groups in the ocean conservation work.
Wonderful. And you live in Dili, but you did start life living on Ataru Island. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I think the reason I'm still here is because my initial stint in Timor-Leste started on Ataru Island. Back in 2015, 2016, when I came, it was very difficult to reach. There were not many boats going. There's still not that many boats going, but at that stage it was even more complicated. And it was just such a different experience for me to where I came from. And being in this quite tough environment, like really cut off from my normal social circle, so conveniences. I think, it was a very rough start, but also a really intense, immersive, beautiful start. The last years I've always been living in Dili, and sometimes you forget actually that the rural Timor is really why I'm here. So it's really nice to get back to those where it started, the initial ideas, rather than the day-to-day parts of Dili, which is a big city by Timor standards.
It's a relative term, yes.
It's the biggest city we have in the country, so that's why it's a big city. But the day-to-day situation in Dili, you drive around with a scooter and get even in the scooter stuck in traffic. And there is obviously like air pollution and problems with the rubbish and the plastic and the roadworks and all of those things. And it's quite good to take a moment sometimes to go back to the origins. And actually, the reason I'm here is not because of the day-to-day living in Dili. It's more because of the beautiful parts in the rural areas of Timor-Leste.
So how would you describe Timor-Leste to somebody who's never been?
It's one of those places where you can really discover someone with a bit of an adventurous mindset and someone who would like to figure out things themselves. This is the absolute paradise for this. There's not so many places and countries left in the world where it's not all presented to you on a golden plate. But if you actually make the effort of coming here, it's so rewarding and it's really authentic. But if someone is on the lookout for an easy retreat, relaxing, everything is just at your fingertips, this is not the place where you want to go. But if you want to nurture your adventurous soul, that's the place.
And as you say, it's good because there's actually increasingly few places you can do that. There's so many parts of the world now where they've all got the luxury resorts and you can have that 5-star experience, that it's more special not being able to have that and actually still have a real adventure these days.
Exactly. And development is catching up here. So you actually have a few of those, I wouldn't call them 5-star resorts, but you have now actually a few places, hotels, restaurants, and so forth, where you can put the AC on and just cool down and take yourself a bit away from the roughness that is out there. Yeah, the moment you're leaving the capital, there's so much to discover if you have that open mindset.
So, what are some of your favourite places in the country?
There's quite a few. My big passion is the ocean. I'm a free diver. I love spending time next to the ocean, in the ocean, above the ocean. So most of my weekend and week-long retreats, in the sense, were actually something ocean related. And they're at Aotearoa Island, not just because my journey started there, but it's such a beautiful place. And it has two different coasts, one where all the boats arrive, where it's a little bit easier to get to and it's easier to reach. And even the coral reef is much more gentle. You don't have to have any kind of deep freediving skills. You can just go out there and snorkel at the surface. Versus on the other side, on the west coast, it's a little bit more difficult to get to. You might either have to hike there or take a boat around the island for a good 2 hours or 1.5 hours. There you have those really dramatic walls to either free dive or scuba dive. Yes, some really dramatic landscapes underwater. And we are so blessed. We're in the middle of the Coral Triangle, and it's the most biodiverse waters in the world in this region around Aotearoa. A few years ago was a very interesting survey done. At that time, it was actually classified as one of the most biodiverse spots anywhere in the world. So it's just very special to do that there. And it's so easy to access once you're here. You don't need to go out by boat very far. You can actually snorkel most of those places. But also around the coast, you have a lot of things to do. But then on the other hand, inland, I'm a mountain biker, so anyone who has a mountain bike or a dirt bike, it's phenomenal. There's endless opportunities of going up and down mountains. It's a very small country, but we have in both, like the mainland, we have a 3,000-meter mountain in the middle, and on the Aotearoa, it has a 1,000-meter mountain. You have the beautiful coastline, but you don't have to put much effort into climbing big hills. They're just next to the coastline.
There's no shortage of hills in Timor-Leste. So if you prefer for mountain biking, where would you recommend that people go biking in Timor?
There's now a Timorese guy who's offering mountain biking tours, and that's really around Mopisi area, which is just below Mount Ramelau, the highest mountain. And that's really nice because there's also the cultural aspect in that area. So it's not just the mountain biking. You actually have the opportunity of getting a bit of an insight into how the cultures in the mountain areas are, because they're obviously a little bit different because the climate is quite different at 2,000 something meters versus the coastal areas. So around there, it's quite easy to access by Timor standards.
Excellent. In terms of the underwater side of things, what are some of the coolest things that you've seen on your freediving and your snorkeling around Timor?
A big drawing card is, of course, the whale migration. We are very lucky that we have the southern whale migration coming through, and they're relatively reliable between October, November. Now with climate change, some of the reliability is a bit changing, but there's a good kind of 6 weeks to 8 weeks where we see the blue whales. They're called pygmy blue whales because they're like about 3 meters shorter than the
They're still
whale.
pretty big.
They're still the largest animal on the planet. And then we also get sperm whales and other whales passing through in that season. You could be lucky, you can actually just see them from the coast. You could be sitting in one of the ocean cafes around Dili or further along the coast around Bacau, and so you can actually see them from the coast. They're coming really close. So even if you don't want to go in a boat, you may actually just sit on an elevated spot and would look out for them. That is such a once-in-a-lifetime experience, seeing actually a whale in the water, but it's also not guaranteed that you see one in the water. It's much more reliable that you see them from land. But in general, year-long, like crossing the channel from Dili to Aotearoa, you always have a very good chance of seeing dolphins, really big pots of dolphins. We have around Aotearoa, there's a resident population of melon-headed whales, pilot whales. So they're there year-round. So if you just spend a lot of time in a boat going around, you will see those kind of things. Other than that, we have quite a few curious dugongs in both on the mainland as well as Aotearoa, and it's really fascinating. So yeah, when I came, they were not as frequently spotted, and there was quite a bit of work protecting the seagrass meadows, which is the food, the nutrition for dugongs, and it seems to have had an effect. Like there's actually more regular sightings of dugongs now, which is really nice.
And
And they're
if
really
somebody
cute.
doesn't know what a dugong is, how do you
It's a
describe a
cow.
dugong?
It's a sea cow in a sense. Some people are more familiar with manatees,
Mm.
which is a part of that family, but they're having some similarities to manatees. It's like a big sea cow, and it just eats all day a lot of seagrass, apparently up to 70 kilos. The seagrass is really small stuff, like it's really like grass, bigger than a terrestrial cow, but they look really cute and they're totally harmless to us. They're just curious
And
if
it's
they
quite
come.
shallow waters they live in, so you don't have to go necessarily diving. You could see them while snorkeling.
Yeah, just 2 weekends ago, I saw one. I filmed one for 3.5 minutes because this one was circling us for a good 4.5 minutes, and it was really shallow. It was
Is
maybe
that a
going down to 4 meters. This one I saw in Atauro at
Ah, too.
the outer reef there. But yeah, the one in Tasitolo, which is just next to the airport, it's a very accessible site. And of course, you have to be lucky. It's not that you can go there and you hope.
Mm,
It's still a big bay,
mm.
but compared to places anywhere else in the world, if you are going there a few times, chances are you may actually be one of the lucky ones. What you guaranteed to see is all the colorful fish life and the coral fish. And the beauty around Timor's water is actually that the coral fringe, so the actual coral is really accessible. You don't need a boat for that. You can just swim out. It's just next to the coast. And that's where you see all the, like the clownfish and the little beautiful other fish in all types of colors
Lots of
that people,
Nemos and yeah.
yeah, a lot of Nemos, but of course also a lot of dories and other fish.
And I like the giant clam. I was in Samoa a few months ago, and it's a big thing. It's the giant clam sanctuary, and it's all quite touristy. But just off in the inner reef from Atauru, there's some incredible giant clams, which just I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, there are. So in the last 6 to 8 years, with the conservation work that happened with the coastal communities, there's more and more places that are having a localized ban, meaning you can still enter as a tourist. You just pay a small access fee of like maybe $1.50, $2. And then there is restrictions to fishing. And it has really paid off. You can see in those places, like 2 weeks ago when I spent that time snorkeling around and I saw the dugong, there was also really big lobsters. And it's really nice. And here it hasn't, compared to some Southeast Asian countries, there hasn't been so much dynamite bombing, because in some places people use dynamite to help with the fishing, which is a very destructive method, meaning it's not just that the fish life suffers from it, but actually there's permanent damage to the coral reef. But it hasn't been that widely used here, like very sparsely, meaning there's much more healthy coral.
You understand it's quite a big push from the government. Was it last month? There was a oceans festival. I saw the president and the prime minister in blue, and one of them had a trident. Did you go to that?
Yeah, I have to say I've been reflecting a lot since I first arrived here in late 2015 to where we are now, because in 5 years of my time, I worked really specifically in ocean conservation. And it was even difficult in the beginning finding Timorese staff who would be recruited because no one had actually the knowledge. But now it's so nice. The public university, UNTL, has in the last years their own degree program for fisheries, ocean-related work, and then another university has also something in that area. So there is actually a lot of Timorese who are now much more knowledgeable about it, and many more programs started. The youth groups in particular are very active. Timor is a very young country, not just by how long it has been independent, but also by population. The Timorese youth, which is anyone up to 35 years, is very hungry for information about best practice and how you can actually mobilize and change things. And there are so many initiatives, from the simple like beach and ocean cleanups and getting rid of all the marine debris to actually more long-term education activities in schools. Some of them are very successful in getting scholarships to go to international ocean conferences and bring that knowledge back. A group I'm supporting a lot is called Underwater Cinema, where they bring people out snorkeling and free diving to really introduce people from a very personal connection point of view with the ocean. The idea is if you see it with your own eyes, you actually have a connection. You want to protect it because not that many people in Timor-Leste know how to swim. So it starts with the simple idea of actually allowing people to see it within the safety of a life jacket. And once they upgrade a bit, then actually doing snorkeling and diving. And it's really great with the current government. The Prime Minister has his own workforce, Blue Economy Unit, which started a bit more than a year ago. And every year in June, when there's the International Ocean Day, they used it as a platform to promote very heavily and connect the ocean with the mountain communities, because there used to be a bit of a disconnect. Just people don't travel much. So people who live, work in the mountains, they don't really have any connection with the ocean. But this Blue Economy Unit has done a lot of public events, created a children's book and some other material to also bring it to the mountain communities, because anything that's being put in the rivers, in the little creeks, in the mountains that then come to the rivers, especially once the rain season starts and there's a lot of water movement. Obviously, all of that ends up eventually in the ocean. So just to make it a bit clearer that something that is being thrown away in the mountain has actually a clear connection to ocean life. And it was a really great event. It was a week-long event of different activities and also putting a few locally managed marine areas in place around that week. But it was a big parade. People dressed up in fancy outfits and looking like octopus and sharks. From a government point of view, there's definitely a clear understanding there is a blue economy, meaning like the ocean and anything that's relating to the ocean. So the accommodation and the service providers, there's actually a monetary aspect to that side as well, not just an environmental one.
That's amazing to hear. Things can be quite hard to do in Timor, but equally they can make quite big changes quite quickly. It's a relatively small country. The Prime Minister, the President get involved personally in these activities and they can really make a big difference. Now, if you have visitors who are coming to Timor to enjoy the underwater life, is there anything you'd recommend that they bring with them?
It's good to bring your own mask and snorkel and maybe also fins. At least a size of fin that fits in your suitcase.
Travel fins.
Yeah, travel fins. I'm a free diver. I like having long fins because then you can actually keep up with those animals that you would like to hang out with. Definitely bring your mask and bring your snorkel because there's very limited supply to buy and hire here, and you don't want to miss out. You want to have something that fits so that you can actually enjoy anything rather than having to deal with a leaking mask.
Exactly. And there will be lots of opportunities for snorkeling and diving because, as you said, Atatürk Island is probably the epicenter, but there is quite a lot along the northern coast of Timor. Now, being a long-time Dili resident, is there anything you'd recommend that visitors check out if they have a day or two in Dili? When you have visitors to come visit you, where would you take them?
I think you haven't seen Dili properly if you haven't made an attempt to go to the Cristo Rey statue, which is really marking the eastern side of the city. And so there's a stretch of beaches, some with little cafes and restaurants, and then just at the very end of the Dili outskirts, you have a big Cristo Rey statue where you can climb up or you can walk around. If you can even hire bicycles now and cycle around. So it's quite complete. I would highly encourage you to go there. And on both sides of the Cristo Rey statue is quite nice snorkeling. So that's where you can put the mask to good use.
Excellent. Are there any common misconceptions about Timor-Leste that you're aware of that this is an opportunity to clear up?
People think it's unsafe. And it has been a long time that the country had some internal conflict. It's like we're really talking about 2006. So I have never felt unsafe in this country. So the only thing is that sometimes it's very difficult in Dili to move around at nighttime to places, but it's not unsafe. It's the difficulty of finding transport if you don't have your own one. So it's more the inconvenience rather than it being unsafe.
And I get asked, but obviously I'm not in the best position to comment on this. If you've got female visitors to Timor, should they have any concerns?
Of course, it's a place that has also incidents where anywhere in the world, unfortunately, there's incidents that are specifically targeted at female. So that happens here as well. I think on the big scheme of things, compared to other places, they're very infrequent. So I think to start with, I would just more encourage people to be, and that actually applies to both men and female, to be a bit more conservative in what you wear. Honor the local dress code, because people are dressed very conservatively, meaning you don't see much skin and you don't see very short skirts or very short shorts. If you're exercising, it's a different thing, like once you're actually in movement. But then if you're really walking around and sitting in a cafe, or especially if you're outside Dili in a rural area, just out of respect. So that's, I think, something that is just a little bit also for your own safety. You will always stick out because you're looking different, but it just makes you stick out in a different way if you're a little bit like you could go to a church rather than look like you're just going for a swim, even that you're in the middle of a city.
Do you have any kind of fun facts or interesting observations about Timor life, which might be something a bit different that people could expect to see when they come here?
I think the funny thing is still that it's the small things. It's not like one big thing that's funny in a sense, but it's what you get greeted the whole time. People call you Malay. The moment you're not a Timorese, you're Malay. And you're causing
Especially
a lot,
kids.
yeah, especially kids. And you're causing a lot of excitement if you're driving through places. And I remember when my parents were here and we were going out to some of the rural areas with a car, even there was a lot of shouting, a lot of welcoming, a lot of, oh. So it even happens if you're in something like a fast moving vehicle. But then it's a
In a
funny
friendly
thing.
way.
It's a
It's a
very
friendly
friendly,
thing, though. It's a
yeah.
very open, welcoming. It's still more the novelty factor.
And then the moment you stop, maybe to buy something at a small kiosk or so, you're getting a lot of attention. A lot of kids come and are curious about you. And then, yeah, but then it's I think I come across the same situation in other places where for some reason they always call you Mr. I'm surrounded with other girlfriends, like they're always calling us Mr. So a few things are just a bit cute. Yeah, there's always a lot of excitement. I think the excitement is the fun part about it.
So when you leave Timor-Leste to go on holiday or to go home, what are the things that you miss?
It's a little chaotic here. And when you're here, you always feel like you need a break from it. But then when you're actually overseas, you're sometimes in realizing how everything else is always is a system, there's a process involved, and it's just so inflexible.
Life's definitely more boring, isn't it? It's exhausting, but then you go leave, you're like, that was so exciting and just interesting and new stuff happening.
Yeah, and there's like here, it's always you just, if you want to make something happen, you can make it happen. And there is just not a process that you can just replicate and next time it works like this again. That's not how it works here. It's always you have to find your way, and then things change. Products are not available anymore. A person who helped you out is now no longer living here or no longer in this function. And so suddenly the process changed. So I think that's the chaos part. Everything always feels chaotic because it's not just that you can establish something and then next time you're doing it. Simple things like you go to a supermarket and you liked a certain type of cheese. No, next time when you're there, this cheese is not available anymore. You have to wait for, I don't know how many weeks for this cheese to be imported again. So there's simple things like this. If you like something, just buy it immediately in bulk. But then, yeah, sometimes when I'm actually back in places like New Zealand or Germany, which are my two anchor points, it's a bit overwhelming about all the options you have. And there's always a system in place that you need to know exactly from A to B, every step of the process. And please don't come up with being creative and innovative. So, whereas in Timor, I think it's the place where you have to be innovative, you have to be creative, because otherwise you miss out.
Now, is there anything that we've not touched on today that you think listeners might find useful for planning their trip to Timor or making the most of their time here?
It really opens doors if you learn just a few words of Teton. And even me, after having been here for 10 years, I wouldn't call myself very fluent. But the more you know, the more you understand, because people are actually naturally shy. So if you make it easier to approach people, you get so much more back in return. So I think just make the effort of learning a few words, a few sentences, and it will make everything so much more meaningful.
And thankfully, it's a relatively straightforward language. You tend to pronounce words as they're written, so that does help. There is obviously complexities to any language, but relative to some other languages, it's not Chinese, it's a bit easier.
And if you know a few words of Portuguese, Spanish, or Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesia, then you can figure out a few things quite nicely.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. That's been a fascinating insight into life in Timor and particularly the ocean side of things, which I think is a big draw card for visitors. So thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Much appreciated. Looking forward to listening to it.
Thank you so much for listening to Exploring Timor-Leste. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving a rating or a review. It really helps more people discover the show. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email at exploringtimorleste@gmail.com. Until next time, obrigado ho